I'm Matthew Buckley Smith, and you're listening to SLEERICKETS, a podcast about poetry and other intractable problems. This is a special episode. I was really excited for Advice from an Unknown Poet, the 12-part limited series podcast from Alice and Jonathan. I was really excited when that came out. I was glad we were able to run the first episode simultaneously on this main feed, and it has just recently come to an end. They have put out now all 12 episodes. They are all available for free. The first 2 episodes, for some reason, are not up on at least Apple Podcasts right now. If you're not able to find them, you can go to unknown-poet.com, and the entire series is up there for free. You can also find at least the first episode, which is entitled Fear, on the SLEERICKETS main feed. It's a terrific series. We talk a lot about that, but we also get distracted. I do have both Alice and Jonathan. It was a really great conversation, and we got into a lot of what the show covers, which is really less about the practice of poetry than the life of poetry, what it is like to be a poet, and how to survive and retain at least some portion of your sanity. It was really lovely, as always, to speak to both of them, and I think you will find this to be a juicy and engrossing episode. I would say I can't imagine anyone getting particularly mad at this one, but I got an angry email just today about another episode that was, I thought, sort of universally enjoyed as sort of a fun, lighthearted, good time episode, but at least not at least by one listener who's a smart, thoughtful guy. I know as a writer. I'm not going to name him here because I don't know if he is comfortable with that. He did write in to object to the account of the kind of the titular story, the central story in that episode, which is called The Montreal Fiasco. I just told him I would read his note. So here it is. I've also attached it as a nota bene at the top of the episode show notes for that episode. Here is the note. I have changed only the name of the figure who appears in the story, who is left unnamed, left anonymous in Ernie's account, and I'm going to leave him anonymous also in the account I'm reading here. Per your recent podcast, the listener wrote, per your recent podcast, there were some key errors in the telling, not that those on the receiving end, including one who deserves far more acclaim than he ever got, and who certainly deserves more than being a punchline. I think there's may have been the end of a clause missing there. I know Ernie bore no deliberate malice, but anyone who might gently push back has no opportunity to do so, and in A's case never will. I find the notion that the reading was a front for a series of drug deals frankly offensive, even if none was intended. It was not A's fault that the guy who was supposed to open the library completely forgot, and only bothered to check his messages a day or two later. A was also completely gutted, and it intensified a path of sustained substance abuse, part of a series of relapses that ultimately claimed his life. He had some good years, though, and he organized some quite successful readings in previous years that the 2015 reading was supposed to culminate had the venue not fucked up. I know this is less amusing. It is, however, significantly more accurate and fair to someone who deserves better than your scorn. So, as I said to the listener, I was sorry that the episode upset him so much, and I'm very sorry to hear about the terrible bad end of this particular poet organizer. It's a very sad story. It sounds terrible. It sounds sad for him, sad for everybody in his life. I'm also not sorry about making the episode or posting Ernie in sharing some anecdotes. I think that as everybody understands who tells stories about readings or anything else, you're going to get the perspective of the person telling the story. I think the point of all of those stories was really just to amuse listeners, and partly because they were a little bit silly, a little bit ridiculous, a little bit provocative. We left them all as blind items and did not name anybody involved. So I think, the nature of the show is that I promise you, whatever your favorite episode is, somebody else hates it and thinks it is wrong. And vice versa. Whichever episode you are most offended by, I promise you somebody has written in not just to say that he enjoyed it, but to say that it brought him a sort of a special solace and really made him feel more at ease in the world. So, you know, I don't want to go on because I want to get to my conversation with Alice and Jonathan, but I do think it's sort of worth mentioning here because I've gotten a good deal of grief recently for picking on people. I think it's worth saying again that yes, we are gossipy. Yes, we are assholes. Yes, you are free to criticize us and write in and tell us we get things wrong. We get things wrong all the time. But the show is, like, the point of the show is not to be mean-spirited. The point of the show is not to pick on people. Part of what I found so alienating in listening to the establishment conversations about poetry in magazines, in highly produced and well-funded podcasts, in other venues for talking about poetry that I felt very excluded by for so long. Part of what I found so alienating about those conversations was that the people who were already successful never got grief from one another. It was all a big kumbaya festival. And this show, there are friends who listen to this show. I love them. I'm grateful that they listen. It's not really for them. There are some very well-established, very celebrated poets who listen to the show. I'm grateful that they listen. I love them. This show is not really ultimately, primarily for them. As Alice says and has said over and over again, this show is for the lonely person. This show is for if you feel excluded from the poetry world, if you feel shut out, if you are alone in Brisbane or in Columbus or in Yorkshire and you feel out of it, you feel not connected, you feel way far away from the center. And yet you love poetry, you love reading poetry, you love writing poetry, and you feel as if there is this world of people doing poetry far away with lots of funding and lots of fancy institutions and nice buildings and prominent platforms, and you feel shut out of that. This show is for you, most of all. And so, honestly, I consider it a service to make fun of some of the people getting actual attention, actually running reading series, actually publishing books, actually doing podcasts. I hope I make fun of myself sufficiently. I certainly try to. I think it's important to take a little bit of the wind out of people who are having some success for the sake of the lonely person listening. That's who this show is for. And so I do consider it actually kind of a service to do some gossiping and some mockery and some deflation. Again, I'm grateful to the listener who wrote in for listening. I'm grateful to him for writing in. Please do continue to write in if we get something wrong. Grateful to Ernie for coming and sharing his stories. He's welcome back. This particular listener, I know him. I quoted him in a recent essay I wrote. He's a very smart guy. I invited him to come share some stories of his own. My philosophy is let's have more disagreement rather than less. Let's bring in more opinions rather than fewer. But I'm not sorry for making the show. I'm not sorry for having Ernie on. I'm not sorry for telling a blind item story about a shambolic reading, the moral of which was, isn't it ridiculous to make poetry, and yet isn't it glorious, and we can't get enough, can we? And indeed, we can't. Neither can Alice or Jonathan, who are here with me. Alice, Alan, you know very well, of course, from this show, and Jonathan Farmer, you probably also know from this show. Excellent poet and essayist. His first poetry collection is coming out soon from LSU. I'm really excited about it. Right now, though, I am mostly excited about Advice from an Unknown Poet, the limited series, all out, free, available now. Check it out. Now, here are Alice and Jonathan. So there was a line that I have had in my head partly because of all the conversation. I was just listening the last one I was listening to was the conversation about the value of poetry. And it feels like sort of like in the conversation because I think there was one that was about productivity, but then it ends up being almost entirely about status because what you
Yeah.
determine is like the primary like clutch factor in distinguishing between Australian and U.S. Ideas about productivity is the question of status and like how one approaches status and how one measures status. So it's a fascinating conversation. And similarly with the value of poetry, it feels like a lot of it ends up being about an attempt to define poetry or an attempt to like, which is part of what I enjoy about these sorts of conversations is that so much of it is it's like Montaignian and that you're like, well, what is the question on the way to the question to answering the question to figure out what the hell we should talk about. But this is the line that's been in my head. It is a quote from a legendary chess figure from the 19th century, Paul Morphy, one of the most famous chess players of all time. He had this amazing run in his 20s. He went to Europe, beat fucking everybody, and then retired. And he was just he was this extraordinarily creative, counterintuitive player who was very famous for sacrificing all of his pieces and then whipping like a forced checkmate combination out of complete thin air. And the line is the ability to play chess is the sign of a gentleman. The ability to play chess well is the sign of a wasted life. And
That's great.
and that has been in my head thinking about I was thinking about activism for one, on the one hand, but I was also thinking about poetry, of course, right? Because there are, like as with chess, it is easy to see it like you can both understand how people make extraordinary sacrifices to pursue this particular discipline at the expense of a lot of things that normal people would care a lot about. And then on the other hand, you can see how somebody who's achieved great things in this one discipline, it also can you turn it sideways and you can see it's like it's paper thin. It feels like, well, wait, what was all this?
Yeah.
Like Baudelaire's mom, I think, said, at the end of his life, I wish he'd never written a word.
That fits so well with some of the conversations we've had about like chess and poetry in terms of the Ding Liren's friend who wrote him the poem, because that is what you
Yeah,
do
Wei Yi,
in,
yeah.
yeah, where you wrote the poem, and like everyone is just expected to be able to do that to a degree,
Right, yeah,
like,
yeah.
but to actually be a poet and to devote your life to such a thing is like something distasteful and weird and concerning about that. Like I can definitely see that.
I don't mean this as a rhetorical question. I'm genuinely asking you guys, why why do we assume why are we like, and I don't mean just the three of us, but why are people in general um inclined to assume that, and I'll just say art in general, but that the making of art, or the commitment to making art, is so different from life. Does that question even make sense?
Like
Uh,
separate from.
Yeah, like, there most things that we do in life we understand as a part of life. And if somebody gives more time to their job, or more time to their family, or more time to, hoping the Mets will get it together this year, like maybe at some point we think their life is out of balance, but we don't think any of those things are like inherently separate from living. And I feel like we tend to talk about making art, and maybe especially making poetry, I'm not sure, in a way that imagines it almost as like an alternative to, or a distraction from living. And I know I've at least rhetorically found myself in that position sometimes, but I'm not sure if I believe it more than just as a way of kind of bridging 2 points in a conversation.
I mean, my reflexive answer is it, but it feels that way.
Mm.
Feels like it's separate from life. Feels like it's not. I mean, I think like I can imagine there being circumstances in which it's sort of integrated into life in a more fundamental way. I can imagine craft being integrated into life in a more intuitive way But yeah, I mean, I think maybe you could argue, hey, the way we think about the individual artist as being somebody who practices, his pursuit in private and is not part of a studio, is not part of a larger community, is not part of a, you know, generations long effort to build a cathedral, is sort of this loner in a garret. Maybe we can say, well, that's a curious modern notion. Maybe so. That's my experience. I
Well,
am a curious modern notion myself.
it's interesting though, Matthew, because you've kind of got two different experiences going in parallel. You've got your life as a poet, which, like my life as a poet and Jonathan's life as a poet, is a solo effort much of the time.
Yeah, yeah.
But then you've also got your work in theatre, which I imagine is more collaborative, at least to an extent. So does that feel like it's more integrated with life?
Well, I mean, yes and no. I think I could again. I think like I could imagine living in a culture in which theater was more of a live art form. I think as because it is such a hothouse flower that is so delicate and so expensive and so difficult to keep alive in our social order today. What ends up happening is that you have little pockets of people parceling themselves away from the world in order to get to make theater together. And for them, they become a kind of a temporary community together, a kind of a temporary cult. I mean, I would say like a religious community almost. And that is why, I mean, I think that's why a lot, you had that t-shirt that says, film is art, theater is life, television is furniture, right? The theater is life part of me, that's huge. I mean, even my daughter, will recognize now that, oh, I've got the post-show depression. I've got post-show blues. It's that you, and what you're missing is not just I love making pure art, but you're missing the community. So I think that I totally feel and understand. It's different it was more the case for me as an actor when I'm sort of doing like what I'm doing right now, which is just basically writing a book in isolation. I still am thinking about other people, but it's still a little more cerebral. But yeah, I think if you are somebody who is a working contributor to the motion picture industry, like if you're maybe a costume person or a lights person or a music person or a background, or no, well, background artist is a euphemism for extra. But like if you were working in a live, healthy, vital, uh, economically and socially integrated medium, then I can imagine that being more of a part of life, being more of a part of a business and culture and everything else. I don't know. I haven't really had much exposure to that in the way I've worked in the arts. And maybe you would say, well, that's because you're not really a real artist, right? Like if you're not making something that's part of like a big, thriving, live, major economic and social enterprise, then you're not really making art. And that's another conversation. But like to the extent to which I've been able to be an artist, it has mostly felt like it just is separated from life. Is that not your experience, the two of you?
Well, I mean, I guess just to keep kind of picking at the threads here. So you're talking about how this is perceived by other people. Like that's the defining factor. And so like a wasted life, like, forgive me, I'm just like going way too far and trying to define terms that maybe are really obvious, but like by a wasted life here, we mean a life that isn't like recognized as valid or valuable by the world at large or the community at large. Is that the implication here? There's so many different ways so many different things that we could mean by a wasted life. And so
Yeah.
um
Yeah, I mean, yes,
I'm a little
yes.
hung up
So I
on that.
think, but I also think like this again. It feels to me like because you have the exchange where you talk about like you would make a joke in an earlier episode about it's even more embarrassing to do something as disreputable as poetry if you were
Yeah.
bad at it, and then you got grief from Shane who wrote in to say like, "How dare you call poetry?" I mean, I'm sure he's tongue in cheek, and he's like, I had a lovely exchange with him the other day. But like, he likes to give me grief for the same kind of thing. Like, well, but because I think for him, poetry truly is like a sacred and luminous and wonderful thing. Like not just in a blurb luminous, but actually in real life. Like I think that's just it's a very sincere thing. Like, and I think it did have a really salvific role in his life. But to me, that also feels sort of like size doesn't matter, right? It feels sort of like saying to a 15-year-old girl, why do you think it's so important to be skinny? You're like, well, she doesn't think it's so important to be skinny. She didn't invent that. That's not her concoction, right? She's absorbed it.
Yeah, and like I don't like. I mean, I'm subject to all these same self-imposed perceptions and anxieties, but I do also find myself thinking like when I'm writing and it's going well, I feel more alive than I do doing a lot of things that make me more valuable. And when I'm
Totally. Yeah,
reading
totally.
something and I'm enchanted by it, I often feel more alive.
Yeah,
And I think in some ways I'm speaking kind of at cross purposes to what the quotation is saying, because the quotation you gave us is I think really about the kind of thing you're talking about. But I kind of feel inclined to put a little bit of a fence around that and say, okay, but that's not really life, and that's something that matters immensely to me, matters too much to me that I can never get away from.
yeah.
But I want to hold on to a sort of unrealized possibility that life is at least partly something other than that. Because I'm not just, I think there was a time when I was, but I'm not just sitting down to write because I'm hoping for the love hearts.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah,
Like
yeah,
that
yeah,
that
yeah,
is
yeah.
that is a part of my life that I look forward to.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, and I'm with you. Like, if I'm writing and it's going well in a sustained way, writing and reading, and it's really
Hmm.
really going well, I don't know that I ever feel more alive than that,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Um, but also, when I come out of that, it is very much like the feeling of waking up from a very overwhelming and rich dream,
Mm.
and looking around and seeing, oh, okay. So it's not that I then give up. I mean, I often like not often, occasionally, I will have a really really powerful intense dream and wake up and not quite be able to shake it. And I still think about it, right? But it is that insubstantial when confronted with the life around me. And that is how, I think the difference with writing is that you feel like, well, I've got something I brought back from the dream. I've got this little pocket full of sand that I brought back from my dream of the beach. And like maybe I can take it out and it'll look like something in a few months. But that is the feeling again. I'm curious, Alice, do you have, what is your sense of this as a real or unreal thing? Because you also seem like you talked some in a couple episodes about just a slightly different relationship to those sort of external measurements in Australia.
Yeah, I'm thinking about something that one of my Poetry Says guests said. This guy called Joel Dean, who I interviewed a couple of times, breaking my rule. He would always describe his writing practice as time that was stolen from his family.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I thought that that was probably putting it a little too strongly.
But no,
But
but I know a lot of writers who do think that way and do use
yes,
language like that.
yes.
Yeah,
And he and I talked a lot, probably mostly off mic, about our discomfort with the financial reality of that. And I think the second time I interviewed him, I was especially unemployed and really didn't, and felt less able to write, because I really did feel like if I was unemployed, not bringing in any money at all, and I would sit down and write something, like it felt like I was sort of saying to Tom, yep, I'm a princess, just,
Yeah.
please just support my decisions here. So
Mhm.
I think I have like a sense of I need to keep one foot in a world where none of the stuff that I actually care about matters. It's a very uncomfortable way to live, actually, now that I'm articulating it to you. Because on the one hand, I kind of never feel better than when I'm on one writing a poem or writing an essay. Like, I don't know, sex is fine.
Sure.
I
Sure.
like
Yeah.
food, but writing well and yeah, I think reading something really amazing too, as you guys have said, that really is the best feeling. And it's not the kind of feeling that you can get in any other part of life that I've discovered. I mean, I haven't done many drugs, but then I do feel like when I'm doing it, I have to find these little pockets of time where no one will notice that I'm doing it. That time isn't spoken for by anyone else, any other obligation. Everything else has to be ticked off and squared away. And I have to feel like I'm totally scot-free. And this is why I get very little writing done. I get very little writing done. And, I speak to people who care about my work and they say, are you writing? Have you got any poems? And I'm like, no. Because you see, there was this laundry and I had to do it. I had to do the laundry. And this is a
It-
fucking ridiculous way to live.
Right.
well, it's funny,
It's just,
at a number of times when we were working on the podcast together, you would say something like, well, it's just, it's not that important talking about your writing or whatever it was. And
it's
I
important to me. It's not important
yeah,
on
no,
a
I
world
I
level.
get it,
Yeah.
but like I
Mm.
as someone who takes himself way too seriously, and like I don't have kids. I have a job where I have like, summers off and stuff. But like sometimes like I don't think people want to be around me that much. Like Caroline's probably glad to have a couple hours off from me while I go
Oh
write.
no. Oh, and
Um,
I'm definitely not saying that I'm like wanted or needed elsewhere. I mean, part of it is like what we talked about in the first episode. Just sidebar, first two episodes have been removed from the internet because Jonathan was too controversial. I have to figure out why that happened. But the first one was about fear. And the other part of this for me is that I'm afraid. I'm afraid to sit down and see what will happen. And so the laundry's not that scary. I know how to fold a towel. I'll go and do that instead.
Corner sheet
Yeah.
though. Do you, I still
I'm
can't do a
I'm
corner
okay with a
sheet.
corner sheet because
Really?
I
All right.
don't have high standards. I just want it to be vaguely square, and then it can go away.
I'll resist the temptation to like turn that into some sort of corny writing advice about
Yeah,
how would you
please.
just treat all our poems like corner sheets? Because I don't believe that.
I was trying to think about the whole premise of the show, advice from an unknown poet. And I was thinking like there are like a couple of near misses of things it's not. Like I know you definitely get these, Alice, because you do podcasts, and Jonathan, you get lots of different weird junk mail, but I don't know if you get the particular kind. Maybe you probably do get like some version of the PR email trying to pitch you on a like how to boost your profile, come, hire our company, we will make you a big deal. And then,
Mm.
if ever you look them up, you can find their like official Twitter account and it has 12 followers. And like, there's nothing wrong with having 12 followers. I have 0 followers on Twitter, but like, not if you're a PR firm, like, not if your whole pitch is that we can make you a big deal. And so, in a way, like, I was thinking there's a version of this podcast which would be like, like, I was thinking, like, what do most unknown poets want? Like, part of this is like a conversation between experienced unknown poets for the benefit of less
It's
experienced
unknown for
unknown poets.
decades.
Right. Yeah, yeah. Because there's a version that's like how to, like how to make it big and which is sort of like, well,
Right.
why would you ask me, which is like occasionally when I do get a question sort of like that, my answer is always,
It's
why
like the
would
thing
you
where it's
ask
like
me?
somebody finally gets a book published and it's a book on how to get published. It's like
Right.
that's
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
first one
No.
you think.
No. But totally. I think that's so. I think that's like There's a like there are jokes about that online, but I think that's a real thing. I mean, that was like I have been asked to blurb a book once, And the second time I was asked, my response was, "Why would you ask me? You can ask so many better people." What a terrible you've already lowered my opinion of you by asking for my endorsement.
I'm really
Um,
surprised to hear that. I would have, yeah, I'm sure
I
that's,
think I'm not going to fight it. I'm not. That's not a
yeah, no,
complaint.
no,
That is
no,
not a
no,
complaint. No,
no. I'm
not
not
at all.
saying that
Not at
people
all.
should now start
No, no,
asking.
no, no.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think actually, like, I'm just gonna like go on the record and say this. I think asking someone for a blurb is like kind of an aggressive thing to do.
yeah. The problem is that you get if your publisher is American, it's in the contract
Oh,
that you
really?
have to do it. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, you know, we have to do it too, unless you're lucky enough to be with a publisher who's like no blurbs, of which there are a couple.
yeah, yeah,
But yeah, it's you got you just want to be so sure that that poet likes your work.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
no, it's awful, and
yeah,
we've done this episode before, but they just shouldn't
Yeah,
exist.
yeah, they shouldn't
yeah, yeah.
exist.
Well, again, a reason that I have great respect for Tim Green at Rattle. He was like, I don't like blurbs, so he was like, I would rather not include any that you have already gathered. And I was like, good luck. I mean, good news. I already didn't and don't want to, so perfect.
That's great.
Yeah. But all right, so here's what I was trying to think about, like what a because I think it was either on an episode of the show or in a conversation we had at some point that like it took me a second to digest that part of what your show was doing because you do talk about poems specifically. You read some poems, you talk about specific poems a little bit, and then the penultimate episode you sort of talk about two poets who matter to you, and you read some poems, talk through those. But for the most part, what it's not really a show about is how to make poems. Like it's not
No.
really a writing show. It's not I mean, you talk about writing advice, good and bad, but it's not really a writing advice show. You know, to the extent to it is sort of tongue in cheek, we don't do advice, but like to the extent to which it is offering any kind of advice, it is advice on being a poet, like on having to be a human being who is in the midst of this thing.
Yes, survival.
Yeah. Like getting through and I was thinking about like my alternative titles for like versions of this
Oh, this is
show.
great. This is great.
Yeah, which because like I was trying to think, what does this boil down to? If you were like how to be a poet, basically, it's sort of like because I was thinking about this as the pamphlet, and so my three paraphrases of this were: so you've got an incurable illness,
Yeah.
or tips and tricks for being a degenerate gambler, or the care and feeding of your terrible new god. Because like that all feels
Oh,
like
wow.
how to deal with this thing that you're in, which does not mean there's no bright spots. It doesn't mean like there's not going to be good stuff happening or there's not going to be appeal to it. It's almost like a pamphlet on how not to quit drugs, like an anti-AA pamphlet.
Yeah, yeah, that's what we're talking about. I mean, I think like the off mic conversations that we started with between Jonathan and I were very much about like, I don't know, it's easy to hear this conversation and maybe parts of the conversations in this series and think that we only have negative experiences and views about being a poet. And you could
Right,
turn
right, right.
around and be like, "So why the fuck are you people doing this then? Like, fuck off." Absolutely, you know, I can see that. But the problem is we're in love with it.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
that's the
And
problem.
and the other thing I'll say is like I don't think it's like a downbeat podcast. I don't think it's an unhappy podcast. I don't think the episode that the three of us are recording right now is an unhappy episode.
No, no, no.
Um, and like,
It's an overwhelmingly positive, warm, pleasant,
yeah,
like friendly show.
and I say
God
that
damn it.
not so much to make a comment, exactly, not so much to make a comment about the podcast. The way it started is that I wanted to find an excuse to do this thing with Alice. Like we didn't have a premise, we didn't have anything. I wanted to make something with Alice. And so I think more than hopefully more than a series of complaints, or certainly more than an attempt to solve any problems or to provide any expertise, I hope what the show really is an example of two people who care about making things, enjoying each other's company and enjoying making something. And so when we've been talking earlier about feeling alive when we're writing or when we're reading, that was the feeling of recording the podcast. Now this was a simpler experience for me because Alice did all the fucking work, so I, I just had to show up and have fun. But I do think part of the ethos of being a poet is that you complain, and all the things that we were talking about are things that are sincerely hard for us and confusing for us. And I know, at least for me, like one of the things that makes it especially hard for me is that I struggle to find people where I'm able to talk about this thing that matters to me in a way that allows me to feel like I'm interacting in good faith and being honest. But when that does happen, it's really fucking special. And so I do want to make the case as well that, like, a lot of what we're talking about explicitly is stuff that sucks, but we're doing it because that action, that activity of thinking about this life and trying to make something of a life is something that doesn't suck.
Yeah, and like another alternative title would be just like, I like you.
Yeah.
Like, I guess I'd be like, good day, mate. Like you could just, yeah.
Matthew, I just can't believe you went back and listened to all of it. That's so sweet and amazing. Are there any episodes that you wanted to answer the question? Because there are one or two that I would sort of like your answer on, but are there any that like stand out to you as, oh, I really had thoughts on that?
I wrote down, I thought you have a line, and I listened to Fear because that was also on Sleep Rickets. Like that was the one we did on
Yes,
our feed. So I
it's
was able to
been,
listen to that one
yeah,
there.
yeah.
I wasn't able to listen to the second one again, though I did listen to it when it first came out. But I loved your line, we're all just trying to scratch our names into a tree. I did think about, I was paraphrasing Jonathan's argument. Failing to manage one's self-image can ultimately mean a failure to manage the quality of one's work. That sounds plausible, but I don't even remember exactly what the larger sweep of it was. What do you do with the fear that you aren't very good? Was the title.
Yeah, that's kind of the question I want to hear your answer on if you have one, but
Oh, so I mean, so I was thinking about like, why do I not feel the specific guilt of stealing from my family by spending time on poetry?
and
Because I
to be
do
clear,
feel,
I don't think people should feel that. I think it is
sure, but
stupid that
like,
I feel that
but
way.
I do
Yeah.
feel, I do hear that from a lot of people, and I do feel lots of shame in my life in all quadrants. I'm a four quadrant shame man, but uh, but that specific guilt, it doesn't register in quite the same way, and I think it's because for me it's more like I married this woman and moved to North Carolina and have raised these kids, but like I was always a Baal worshiper, right? Like sacrificing, live human infants on my fiery altar in the backyard, and like I still go in the backyard and do that every night, right? Like I
Mm.
still am a Baal worshiper, and part of me is like a little bit like the like, you knew what this was, you knew, like I was always a Baal worshiper. Like, so part of me just feels like I'm like that's what the god demands. Like I'm keeping, in Yonan Vasquez speak, I would say I'm keeping the wall wet. Um,
Yeah.
so it's not even that, like, I do have a terrible fear of not being good enough, but I think it is more that it is over. What burns much hotter is an overall self-loathing that is probably not mitigable by any metric of quality, and then like a more urgent fear of not sacrificing enough live human infants at the
Yeah.
fiery altar of Baal,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. And yeah, that's a really insanely good image. What I'm realizing as you're saying this too, that I also want to just jump in and say is that I think the reason I personally feel that I should not be spending time writing unless I've done everything else is because I don't think I'm good enough. Like, I think my sacrifices are sort of bullshit anyway. So I only should be doing that in extra time. I think other poets, such as yourself, Matthew, I'm like, well, of course he writes every day. He's good at it. That's what he should be doing. That's what Brian should be doing. They're real writers. You're not a real writer. You should be getting a job. That's how I think of it. And I do not want either of you to jump in and like say anything to
Yeah, no,
contradict that. Yeah.
Sure, sure,
no,
sure.
you suck.
Right.
You don't.
No,
Thank
but I
you.
even like I'm thinking about like
Yeah.
conversations I've had with you where I've thought like, oh, Alice is actually quite writing some like quite good poems, and I can like when I think of myself saying, as I have said to you in the past, like, oh, you should actually be sending these out. You should like these are actually formidable, and like people who are really discriminating are have taken notice of them. It also to some extent feels to me like I'm like the guy in the black hat in The Witch saying like, "Wouldst thou like to live deliciously?" Like it's not necessarily. I'm not necessarily helping you when I say that.
But
Yeah.
so I'm slipping into this role that feels really unnatural for me. But I'm curious. Like, I don't just waste time writing poems. I waste time
Yeah.
watching
For sure.
sports. I waste time staring at my phone. Like, and I have a certain kind of guilt about staring at my phone. But I don't really feel guilty about like watching sports.
Mm.
Why why do we treat is it because the writing implies some sort of telos that we might not achieve in a way that like watching reality TV doesn't? Why do we feel something different about like giving time or stealing time for this than for the other ways that we waste time
This is why
or don't waste
but I
time?
think you actually clarified. I don't feel guilty for sacrificing infant to the altar of Baal. I feel guilty for being a Baal worshiper. But like, if I'm a Baal worshiper, of course I'm going to sacrifice live human infants at the fiery altar of
But
Baal.
so,
Like, of
but
course.
if you were like a world famous worshiper, where they're like that guy sacrifices all the best infants, his slaughtering technique is second to none, and you were
Just I was
somehow
worried we
able to
hadn't
look at
alienated enough Christians yet.
and you were somehow able to look at the altar and feel like, yes, I am slaughtering the fuck out of these infants. Like
You're
nobody
the high
slaughters the way I
priest.
slaughter. Yeah,
Yeah.
like it does it really come down to a function like of just us not having success that we believe in, not having recognition that we believe in, or is there some other variable that I'm not accounting for there?
I think there's also the variable of what is acceptable more broadly. It is so acceptable, for you to be a man who sits in front of the TV and watches sport. That is a thing.
Mhm.
It's really acceptable for me to be like, oh my God, the Summer House reunion was so amazing. I can't believe that Wes got fired. We're all so excited. Like that's like an acceptable thing for me to do and say. But when we turn around to the rest of polite society and we say, I'm a Baal worshiper, then they go, what kind of
They actually hide
Baals
their
do you
kids away from
worship?
us.
It's away. No, but you know how
uh,
those conversations go. They're fucking awkward. It's awkward as hell when
yeah.
he's, yeah,
So
because it's not acceptable. I don't know
mhm.
why it's not acceptable. It just isn't really acceptable.
So two questions. One, no, screw that. Two, when I was younger, older poets I would talk to, a number of them would say, "I'm really writing for the dead,"
Hmm.
and that baffled me. It didn't make any sense to me at all.
Oh,
And I've come to a point where I think I at least partly understand it. or at least I have my own version of it, which is that I'm not writing for the dead, in that I believe I'm in conversation with them, or that I'm a worthy heir to anything that the best of them did. But I do think that I'm engaging in a kind of human history. And that human history is full of shitty poems, shitty poems. And it's full of all these rhythms that get passed down, and all these attempts to do different things in different ways. I talked on one of the episodes about poetry being a kind of genealogy, term poetry being a kind of genealogical term. And I think one meaning of that for me, when I'm at my best, and again, I'm kind of like locking myself into this role as the positive person, I think just for the sake of conversation or just out of stubbornness. But I do feel like I'm engaging in a kind of human tradition. And there are times when I'm able to feel like, on a horizontal axis, what I'm doing doesn't feel very human. It doesn't feel very social. But on a vertical axis, it feels deeply human. It feels like I am part of some ongoing, if sometimes subterranean or quiet, human history. Not in a way that I think says anything about my poems, but I do find it more possible to feel validated by that. Not validated by being good, but validated by being here in some way, by being part of something that feels like deeply and even ancestrally human.
Yeah, that's so much of that. I mean, what saying you're writing for the dead is always a little bit of a silly claim because they're dead; they can't read it.
Yeah.
But writing with the dead, writing in conversation with the dead, writing for
Mhm.
the not yet born. I mean, I think all of that makes so much sense. And I don't believe in ghosts, but I definitely have felt like I've been talking with the dead by reading poems and writing poems, and messing with versions of translations and things. I mean, that is a community. I mean, that's the line from our Spaniard friend in grad school who made fun of Ryan by saying all of his friends are dead, and Manuel's response was, "They are not dead." In an odd way, like that is the yeah. I actually was listening to, and I don't think I quite finished the episode on finding people. How do you find your people? So much of what I think of as finding your people is finding your fathers, your mothers,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Your chosen dead, right? The dead who choose you. That those are your people as well as the friends you make. And again,
Definitely.
like there's that funny balance that you talked about. Some we've talked about on SLEERICKETS as well, about like with with friends who are poets, you have that funny balance of like, well, I have to like you, like then you have this sort of slightly fraught relationship with the work. Sometimes the work comes first. That's how you meet somebody. Sometimes it comes later. It's often like it's not entirely clear cut. You have a different relationship with your dead, right? Because you only really have the work, and maybe sometimes you have
Yeah.
fragments of a life that speak to you in some way, but really
Hmm.
the work is the person that's left.
Hmm.
Yeah. And even if you end up finding, like, I'm thinking about reading when I read the Tom Gunn biography, I didn't know much about Gunn's work or his life, but I just picked it up in a bookshop in Sydney, and I opened it to the page where there's a photo of Ivor Winters wearing a leather jacket. And I'm like, well, that's pretty hilarious. I want to read this book. So bought it, ended up reading all 500 pages of it, and over that span got to know Tom Gunn, the guy, the poet, and kind of fell in love with him. But as
Yeah.
with so many others, he's got like huge number of imperfections. Like he's not an angel. He's not a
Had
terrible
no interest in
dude,
being
but
an angel.
he had no interest in being an angel. But the thing is, like, he can't hurt me. Ivor
Yeah.
Winters can't hurt me. They can't do anything. They're going to stay still on the page, and so I will always be safe from whatever it is they get up to.
Well, Gunn's so interesting too, in that he's I haven't read that book, but I've read a lot about Gunn over the years, and he's somebody who his life was made up of a lot of parts that would seem incompatible to most of us.
Yes.
Even his poems are made up of elements that seemed incompatible to many people.
Yeah.
His not individual poems, but his if you pick up his collected poems, you're seeing very different styles, not in the sense that he moves from one style to another, but like ongoingly existing many different styles. And I think Gunn's a really interesting example of this guy who was deeply invested in this counterculture, who was, you know, I think he understood that Winters sort of could never fully accept him once he was out. Not that he was ever particularly in, but Winters wasn't gonna like accept him as somebody who's queer, accept him as someone who was interested in like other kinds of poetry. The last one in particular was a kind of heresy, I think, to Winters. And it feels like, the sort of late 16th, early 17th century poets in particular were just a kind of constant for him. And he didn't need for that to be all of his life. Like he didn't need to be a poet all the time. And he didn't need to be a radical all the time. And he didn't need to be a traditionalist all the time. There's a weird quality, at least on the page, of apparent health in Gunn. There's the sense that he can avail himself to his various impulses and tastes and interests and loves, uh, and that they all sit together for him. They're not contradictions, and I do think it's a kind of interesting model for some of our sort of quandaries, in that, and Gunn was extremely successful from a very young age. I mean, he
Mm.
was yeah, picked out uh, long before he came to before he even came to the United States. He was like already established as an important poet. But he seems capable of having poetry be just a thing in his life, and that didn't diminish his devotion to it or his commitment to the work. But it didn't really have anything to do with whether or not he was going to get laid that night, or which
No.
drugs he was going to take, or which bathhouse he was going to go to, or even which poets he was going to hang out with. And
It
I
almost
do
seems
think he's
like he was able to handle the addiction of poetry because he had actual other addictions.
yeah, and it just I I think when he was
Is that
doing it, the
bad?
state.
No, I was trying. It's a question I want to ask y'all later. But like, I was trying to come up with like a really good questions for unknown poets actually to ask. And like one of the rough drafts of one of my
Where's the nearest
questions
meeting?
was like, which drugs can I do? It's like,
And I will also say, like, I think you all have talked about this on Mike before, but like I think one of the reasons that so many fuck ups are artists is not that they're artists because, or not that they're fuck ups because they're artists. They're artists because they're fuck ups. Like I think there is something. Art is, among other things, an opportunity to take what is intolerable or disappointing or disorderly and make it beautiful or rewarding or orderly. So I think I don't think you have to be. I don't know where I was going with that. Fuck it.
but I want that to be true, but I also feel like not. It's not just that there are like rich, hot, successful people who are good poets. It's that they're like rich, hot, successful people who like their lives, who are good poets. Like in a way, it's like you can. The question is, are you? How many children are you sacrificing at the fiery altar? Like a there's a like stand up comics. Like there's stand up like so often stand up comics are kind of ugly, kind of weird looking. but also there are like Anthony Jeselnik's or like Christina Mariani, like where you're just like, you're incredibly hot and you seem to be doing really well. Like, what's his name? Terrence Hayes. Like, you
Yeah,
fucking
Terrence Hayes.
asshole. You like
Yeah.
good
Oh,
athlete, handsome, eloquent,
so
charming,
pretty.
seemingly sanguine guy who also is
Also,
talented. Like,
also good enough athlete to play college basketball.
Oh, so you hate
At
him. You hate him.
at least plays above replacement level as an artist, like as a visual
right,
artist.
right, right.
Really?
But see, I mean, so that's what
Yeah.
I mean is like I want it to be true that being a fuck up gives you a special edge or gives you a special
No,
in
it doesn't give you
or
an
like
edge. It
leads
gives
you along that path. But it just like
you a motivation.
but
It
like I
gives
it's
you.
like somehow there are also those people who are just like things are going great for them and yet
Sure.
the proof of the pudding's in the tasting. They're still making the stuff that you're like, well shit, that's really like I do
Yeah.
share this thing with you because we serve the same master. So
It's
Yeah,
not
and
like they're the rule, though. Like, let's be clear. These people are the exception.
but
It's
they're
not as
the
if.
exception in any category. Like people
Yeah.
who are
I guess
who are
that's
that
true.
well
Yeah,
rounded or who are that are the exception in every category. But
that's true. That's true.
He's also
Yeah.
tall.
right,
Yeah,
like yeah, it's like there are so many ways to be bad looking, but like there aren't that many ways to be good looking. Like you can be so fucked up in so many different directions. But like it's harder to get the balance all right.
So I sometimes struggle to like figure out how much people are joking about something versus how much they really mean literally what they're saying. I mean, how bad do we really think it is? Like, I mean,
What do you
are
mean?
we exaggerating? Are we exaggerating for effect? Like, I don't
Life as a
like,
poet.
yeah, like,
How bad is it?
I don't know, like it,
Pretty bad.
yeah, like, I mean,
Well, okay. Here's a conversation that me and Lou, hello Lou, conversation that me and Lou
hello.
have sometimes. We could just move to Byron Bay and none of this would matter. Sometimes we say that to each other. We're like, we could just go and live by the beach and have absolutely no concern about any of this stuff, and it would all melt away so quickly. Like, part of the reason, like, it is bad sometimes it's good. It's a mix, everything's a mix. But the thing about poetry is, it, like,
So
it's just very fast. It just could go away
yeah,
and it wouldn't make any tangible difference to your
but,
life if it just went away.
but like,
You could just live in Byron
I,
Bay.
I can say with very great confidence that the odds that I would be anxious and miserable and whatever else we say, it, in exactly the same amount that I am if I had never started writing poems is it's close to 100% chance. Like I do not think I don't think I would be running around on the beach drinking, I don't know, whatever you drink on the beach, and just
Why are you running and drinking
like
at the same time?
crocheting, live,
Being
laugh,
chased by the
love,
cops,
drink wine, pillows. if,
the beach
if
cops.
yeah.
That's how Frank O'Hara
Yeah.
died.
Oh.
Too soon.
It's not too soon. Come on.
Too soon.
The day Lady died wasn't too soon. It's not too soon.
Why you gonna throw that in his face, huh?
I love Frank. Frank O'Hara's great. Frank O'Hara's great.
No,
But,
I'm just, yeah.
How
But
bad
no,
is
no,
it?
like I think it's not so much like nobody respects poets anymore or can poetry matter. It's more like here's a fabulous new way to almost definitely fail. Like you like it like it's if you it's like you were going to invest yourself deeply in something that you that you I can almost guarantee you can't do, right? Like and then that's what you will struggle to do. That's the I think that's
Yeah.
part of the pain. But my inclination to say like it's not necessarily bad.
Mhm.
And like there's not even necessarily a reason it should be bad. I just know a lot of miserable poets.
Yeah, but again, like I
Yeah.
think the causation is
Yeah. It's murky. I did want to like because you talk about writing advice and you kind of your refrain is we don't give any actual advice on the show, and you have one of your episodes is all about bad writing advice, and you surveyed some Sleep Rickets people who gave some good answers to that, and you talk a lot about like, oh, this writing advice is bad, this writing advice is bad. Here's my proposition. I want to hear, like, maybe you can kibitz it, but like here's my proposal when it comes to writing advice. Lots of writing advice is very helpful. Maybe even almost all writing advice is very helpful, but no writing advice is reliably helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in teaching, there's a lot of talk about scaffolding.
Mhm.
So that when you teach something, you put kind of scaffolding around it at first so that kids can kind of build up. And then the idea is that gradually you take the scaffolding down. And I think one thing that can go wrong in scaffolding is that you don't tell your students that it's scaffolding.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
think that's part of the building.
yeah. Right.
Mm.
And so, like, I think I said in one of those episodes, like, almost all writing advice to me is a shortcut. Like, it's a way of simplifying something. So, like, write what you know. It keeps you from doing certain things that are not likely to go well. Uh, the better advice to me would be know what you write. Um, but it's simpler to just say write what you know. Um, and so I maybe one way of thinking about this is with writing advice. Part of the problem is that people aren't really explaining what kind of scaffolding they're putting up. They're presenting as metaphysical advice what is really a set of training wheels.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's true.
Yeah, I mean, as with training wheels, or like bumpers and bowling, like it's a way to avoid making certain obvious mistakes.
Mhm.
Um, like I did a little talk for Ryan's class the other day, and I was just talking about like part of what is valuable about having somebody who's done a lot of writing with you, that like we've studied a lot together, we've studied with each other, we've corresponded a lot, we've kind of learned poetry in parallel. Like part of what's really valuable about that is not just that like he knows some things I don't know, which is true. He knows plenty of things I don't know. And it's not just that like he has a he has a fresh perspective. That is part of it. But like if I had to kind of pin down what are the mechanics of what is really happening when he really helps me with something, part of it is that he's able to, when reading a poem of mine, comb through the you know staggering library of babble of advice that we've both learned and pick out the ones that I need right now for
Yeah.
this poem.
Mhm.
Like they all have purposes, right? Any one of those rules of thumb, any one of those guidelines, any one of those principles can be valuable. But it's sort of like saying, like, I have a toolbox full of tools. Let's use the tools. Like, no. You need to use like two of the tools right now. You don't need to use
You don't
all
even
of
need
them.
to you don't even need to be somebody who knows somebody else's writing really well to do that. I think what you're talking about is just in general someone who's a really talented
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean,
editor.
I don't think that's. Yeah. I mean, I have a different kind of principle about like in being inside the boat versus being outside the boat, and I think part of what I mean though too is like even if we knew 100% of the same writing advice, it would
Mhm.
still be
Right.
extremely valuable to
Yes.
have someone to say like which of the 50,000 things is applicable here.
Mhm.
So you said something, Jonathan, in an early episode, which yeah, I've been kind of rolling around a little bit. You said that you challenged the advice that you should write what you most want to read, and your challenge is basically like, well, I want to read a lot of things, so I'm not gonna write all of those things. I'm certainly not gonna write all of those things right now. But then a more urgent imperative you proposed was that I want to write what I can write. And
Yeah,
then
kind of
but
like
it's interesting because a couple episodes after that, you really challenged the notion that one should write only what he can write. So I was curious,
yeah.
like,
I mean, like,
what's the triangulation? What's the kind of
yeah. I mean,
precise?
it's kind of like ideally, it's a Venn diagram. Like the value of the advice to write what you want to read is it keeps you from like it forces you to think about an audience that you actually understand.
Yeah.
Right.
And not just try to write something that's going to please somebody else.
And in particular to please like an unreal person, like,
Right. Yeah.
you know, that because I so often when you hear people talk about in particular forms of writing that are supposed to like be disruptive or whatever, it's like who's the person who you like
Who needs the
who's
disruption?
the reader you're imagining, who's the actual human being that you imagine reading this. My sense is that it's no human being, or it's like a cartoon villain who you
It's
imagine.
like the average voter, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but I do think it's also valuable to figure out what you can write. So it's kind of like a Venn diagram in some ways. Like what is the thing at this moment that I can do well, or I can get to a point that I can do well, that seems like it would be valuable to a real person such as myself. And I do think if you're writing something that you wouldn't personally want to read, it's going to be hard to stay in good faith with yourself. So I do like, but I think it's like finding a place in the Venn diagram. Like the thing that I most want to read at any moment may not be the thing that I'm best equipped to write. Like I love reading science fiction. I do not have the imagination to write science fiction.
So when you say like, and the way you put it, I think was I want to write what I can write. But in
Mhm.
that construction, maybe when I first heard it, I was thinking of the I as being the operative term, but it may be that the can was actually more operative. Like
Yes.
it's more about ability than essence.
Yes. Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
all right. That makes because and that clarifies for me then the follow-up question, which is what's the difference between this and finding your voice?
Mhm.
Right. So this is really about like what I think is actually is good advice from Stephen King's On Writing, which was expanding your vocabulary is great. More urgent is making use of the vocabulary you have.
Mm. Yeah, it's kind of like finding the register in which you can hold a tune.
That was the first half of my conversation with Alice and Jonathan. In the second half, we get deeper in the into the woods, into the weeds. We get more personal. It gets messier, but it is a really fun and lovely conversation, and you have a pretty good idea of where we might go, what kinds of stuff we're going to get into. You can go check that out at SLEERICKETS.substack.com. Put your email address in, and I will give you a week's access for free. After that, it's really fucking cheap. If you would like to listen to The Secret Show, but you can't afford it, write me at SLEERICKETS@gmail.com, and I will hook you up. And if you have a little expendable income and you would like to do more to support the show, you can sign up to be a motherfucker of the arts, a founding member. You can choose your amount, give a little bit more every month, and make a big difference. Or you can go to SLEERICKETS.com. On the website, go to the upper right-hand corner. You will see a button that says Chip In, or if you are on your phone, you can just press the plus sign and the Chip In button will appear at the bottom of the screen. Click on that and you can donate directly to the show. I am grateful. It does make a big difference. It keeps us in books and audio equipment and magazine subscriptions so we can keep making the show and getting this out to you every week. Go check out, if you have not yet, Advice from an Unknown Poet, either on your favorite podcatcher app or at unknown-poet.com. Thank you all for listening, and with any luck, I will be speaking to you again very soon. Until then.